What's the point? What's the point, eh? The focal point. Just what is the focal point? Well, the focal point is usually the main subject or the main part of the scene. It's what the eye is naturally drawn to, so it's a really important part of your composition. So many pictures are made up of a beginning, a middle and an end. For a landscape, that's usually the foreground, the midground and the background. So this creates a bit of a story for your viewer as they look at your picture, and the focal point is the conclusion of that story. And therefore it's important not to leave the reader or the viewer disappointed in any way by not having one there. Now, of course, not every picture adheres to this, but a focal point is still an important aspect of any picture. So what else does a focal point do, and why else do we need one? Well, I bet you're wondering about the background, aren't you? Yeah, I decided not to put these lights on this time. I think it looks better without them. What do you reckon? Well, a focal point isn't just a subject. It isn't just something that happens to be in the frame. It adds structure and it also adds balance. But a focal point can also be used to add a sense of scale. And this can be used to add impact and drama to any picture. Having a small subject or focal point in a vast area will exaggerate that area that it's in. It will show the grandeur compared to the small focal point within it. So that's your sense of scale, and you can use that effectively, as I say, to add drama and impact to your image. But you can also use focal points in your landscape images, and you can use natural lines to lead to these focal points. So these can be roads or paths, walls, or anything like that. Anything that's got a natural line through your picture that leads the eye to the main focal point. Now these can just be straight lines, or they can be curvy lines. A nice S shape within the landscape is a great way to lead the eye to your main focal point. But they can also be diagonal lines. Diagonal lines add lots of impact to any image, and you can use them effectively as you can converging lines. They work in a very similar way. They have diagonals, and that diagonal converging line can lead the eye to that main focal point. Now you can also use that focal point to aid your composition. And you can do this by placing the focal point on a rule of thirds. Now this can be anything in the landscape, a barn, a tree or a distant hill, and all you've got to do is place it on the rule of thirds, one of the intersections around the frame, and that again will lead the eye to that main focal point. Now you can also use colour to emphasize the focal point, but you can also use black and white. You can use those different tones of black and white again to lead the eye to the main subject, the focal point. In the end, it's all about keeping the viewer informed and taking them to the place you want them to go. But of course you don't have to use the rule of thirds. You can place the focal point anywhere you want within the frame. You could place it in the dead center, you could place it on the edge of the frame. It's whatever feels right. There's no rules, so just go with whatever feels right. In fact, the 20th century American photographer Edward Weston famously quoted, "Consulting the rules of composition before taking a photograph is like consulting the laws of gravity before going for a walk." Now how refreshing is a statement like that? It's something you should think about a lot. It's whatever feels right. So whilst placing the subject in the centre of the frame can get ridiculed for looking a bit static, it can also look calm and balanced. Now with portraits, the main focal point is often the eye. Yes, the eye, the windows to the soul. So you can use that to draw your viewer to the main focal point, which is the eye. Again, this can be placed in the center if you want, the head of the subject, dead center, the eye is drawn directly to that, or you can put it off center so that the eye is drawn to one corner of the frame. And a focal point can be quite small, but it can also be very big. It can be the main part of the scene, the main subject that fills the frame. So when it's big, it's obvious, you really can't miss it. So it's not always about creating a sense of scale. But you don't just have to have one. You can have multiple focal points, and they can be used together to draw the eye around the scene. Now if you are going to have them all linked together, then it's probably best they're all pretty much the same size. But if they are different and you've got two different sizes, then those two sizes really need to be significant to really work in the frame. Now the other technique you can use to draw the eye to the focal point is with differential focusing or selective focusing, having one part of the scene in focus, the focal point, and one part out. Now for this you could use a telephoto lens with a nice wide aperture. That'll throw everything out of focus apart from your main focal point. But you can also use a standard lens, again with a wide aperture, if you get close enough to your foreground subject to blur that and leave the background, the focal point, still in focus, or the other way around. So this is a favourite technique of mine, and I love walking around with a prime lens with a wide aperture, just looking for subjects and scenes to blur, leaving the main subject, the main focal point, in sharp focus. And one last subject to use as a good focal point is a silhouette. Now silhouettes make a fantastic strong focal point, but you'll find that many photographers don't shoot these. They seem to be battling more to get detail in the highlights as well as the shadows. But if the light's right, then go for it. Use a backlit silhouetted shape to draw the viewer's eye to. So the focal point is a really important aspect of any picture. So make sure your viewer knows exactly where they're meant to be looking in the frame. So use a focal point to make your pictures more dynamic with lots of impact. I'll see you on the next one.